This is Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. You're listening to one of the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can find all the other shows at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, President of the Non-Threat Assassination Squad, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who compete in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, I've been attending IDPA matches since 2011, and over the years, I've met some really amazing people thanks to this sport. Ignore all the colorful jerseys and the sponsor logos, and underneath, you're going to find everyday men and women who volunteer their time and their effort and spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. And today you're going to meet another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. I want to take a minute to talk about our good friends at Cook's Holsters. When I first got started in concealed carry, I really didn't know what I was doing. I picked out one of those cheap prophylactic holsters that collapse when you draw the gun out. Yeah, I know, I was one of those guys. But then I started learning more. I took some classes, I read books, I watched videos, and I found out about the advantage of Kydex. And that's how I discovered Cook's Holsters. What makes Cook's Holsters special? Well, they're an American success story for one thing. Born in the founder's basement, Cook's Holsters grew so much that the owner left his job, his full-time job, to make holsters full-time, and then expanded and hired people because he had to have help to fill orders and meet demand. They even sell printed Kydex to many of the other holster makers, and their subsidiary business, Cook's Molds, actually makes the molds that many of those other holster makers use to make their products. Custom molded to fit your firearm, Cook's Holsters are available for carry, for range work, for competition. I use them every day. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and save 15% off your order at cooksholsters.com. Our special guest today is Mike Philley from Goshen, Indiana. Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, good evening. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living there in Goshen.
I'm just an average Joe. I'm a little older, looking over the horizon at retirement, but being from Goshen, Indiana, I, for a living, am heavily immersed in the RV industry. I do purchasing. So basically, I sit behind a desk and complain a lot, which suits me very, very well. It puts some mighty fine bread on the table, if I don't mind saying.
Very good. So being from, are you originally from Indiana?
Actually, I was born in Kalamazoo, but when I was like 7 or 8 years old, my dad came to Indiana to work in, drum roll please, RVs.
Uh-huh.
He worked for originally Cortez Motorhome Company in Battle Creek. They built a one-piece fiberglass motorhome, and Starcraft in Topeka, Indiana, acquired that particular line, and we came with it. And we've been here pretty much ever since.
So growing up in southern Indiana, where did the interest in guns get started? Is that something your dad introduced you to as a kid, or something that came along later in life?
Actually, Dad did, and my grandfather did. My dad's father, my grandfather, was caretaker of the Kellogg Farms in Hickory Corners, Michigan. And my dad, through high school, he went to Kellogg Agricultural, got A's in algebra by keeping the geese out of the wheat field. So a Model 12 shotgun rode on the bus with him every day to school. It was walked down to the principal's office and put behind the door. And when the appointed hour came, he went to the principal's office, retrieved his Model 12 Winchester, and went goose hunting. And that's the way it went.
Those
were the days.
Those were the days. It's amazing.
Those were the days.
To try to remind people of those days when now the idea that you could actually go to school with a gun and even in your vehicle is unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just something kids today don't know anything about, and that's a shame. But it's sad commentary on our political climate.
It is. It is. Where did the interest in competitive shooting come from? How did you get involved in that?
I had a friend that was a gunsmith here in Goshen, and he got me started in NRA action, Bianchi Cup stuff, but clear back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Bowling pins, the Second Chance bowling pin shoot in Michigan, the original one. And IPSC. He introduced me to IPSC. And that was the hook I took. I swallowed that one completely. And I ended up, my first handgun that I shot competitively with was a 1911 Colt Clark bowling pin gun. Now, if you are old enough to know what a Clark bowling pin gun is, you're old enough to roll with me. After that, I had a Wilson LEK that I ran with all through IPSC in the 80s and had a blast with it. And then as time rolled by, I started settling down and got married and had kids, and I took about 10, 15 years off of competitive shooting. When I came back, the arms race that was going on in IPSC when I stepped away was in full bloom, and I found IDPA. And the Wilson LEK came off the 1911. We converted it back to a stock pistol, and away we went. And I haven't looked back since. That's been 11 years now.
Right.
Something along that line.
Do you, what was that introduction to IDPA? Who told you about it? Where did you go for that first local match? And what do you remember?
A friend of mine named Joe Geisman, who works out of Kendallville in Indiana and teaches defensive handgun. He's an instructor with several certifications. We were shooting together just for practice every once in a while. He said, you know what? I found this match we should go try. And it's up in Sturgis. And he had already done the legwork, and he had talked to the match director at the St. Joe County Conservation Club. I had never even heard of it. The match director's name was Charlie Reynolds. He says, we're going to go up there and we're going to shoot this. We're going to try it. I said, okay, I'm all in. I read up on it, went out on the internet, read up on IDPA, and I came back to Joe and I said, if I get out there and it's a bunch of guys in camouflage jumping over logs and screaming, I'm getting in the truck. We got there and met Charlie and had the time of our lives. It was everything IPSC used to be. They did not have the arms race involved with it. It was street equipment. It was practical. On the guys, it was still a game. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with it. And I've been at it ever since. Eventually, Charlie, we got so involved in that club that Charlie wanted to step away. He was at retirement. Mm-hmm. So Joe took it over for a while. And real in Joe's way, and I ended up in charge of the St. Joe County Conservation Club. I'm the match director. I inherited it by default. And I still go to it all the time, and I'm still in love with it. So there you have it.
The accidental match director.
There you go. Yeah, some are destined for glory, and others have it forced upon them, and here I am.
Before we talk about your experience as a match director, let's talk a little more about your shooting career. What was the first, how long after that introduction before you tried your hand at a sanctioned match? And where was it?
Okay, it was several years actually before I actually found the time to shoot a sanctioned match. And it was the 2014 Indiana State down at Atlanta near Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And I left there that day, the 2014 state champion, the ESR revolver division.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. I've got the hardware. I came home, sold the revolver because I suddenly had nothing left to prove, bought an SSP and said, okay, now we're going to go conquer this. And I have yet to achieve that goal, but I'm having a really good time trying. Now, a little background to winning that hardware. It sounds really good until you realize that out of 100 shooters at that match, there were 2 revolvers.
Well, you didn't have
Both
to
of us.
You didn't have to admit that.
No. It's a good story. I mean, I went fair and square. I'm not ashamed of it. But both of us were in the sharpshooter division. Both of us shot ESR, and we swapped the lead all day long. It was a real race. We might have finished way behind everybody else, but we were the race that everybody watched. We had a very good time. It was worth every minute.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty cool.
What was the introduction to revolvers? You went to you started out in IPSC and shooting a Colt 1911. What enticed you to pick up the wheel gun?
The revolver goes clear back to police PPC and the Bianchi Cup stuff back in the early 80s. I used to shoot a 6-inch 686 with a full lug weight and the big Bomar sights on it. And this was before, anybody had even dreamt of an aim point, at least dreamt of one that was small enough to mount on a handgun. And I actually believed, and to a certain degree, I did shoot a revolver more consistently with more accuracy. I wasn't faster, but I certainly shot it better. So I had the opportunity just by happenstance to pick up a 625 4-inch barrel, which is IDPA legal.
Mm-hmm.
And I started tinkering with that. And I was actually, for a revolver shooter, very, very good with it. I wasn't Jerry Mickley, but for an old fart down here in Indiana, I was holding my own. And I thought, okay, let's roll with it. And in those days, I was making an error, and I realize now that it is an error. I had several different handguns that I did shoot competitively. And I go to a match with a revolver 1 month. A couple weeks later, I go to another one with a 1911. A couple weeks later, I go to another one with an H&K. I was shooting several pistols. I was having a very good time, but I was mastering none of them.
Right.
And the key here is, and I had been told this before and never listened until recently, pick one and stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm in SSP shooting an H&K VP9, and I haven't shot any pistol but it for the last 3 years, and it shows. Yeah, and in the end, doing all that, I was still having a very, very good time. That was the point.
Yep. So talk about so you dipped your toe in the sanctioned match pool in 2014. What have you been involved in since? What matches have you been to? And is there one over those 5 years that you can look back on and think either fondly of or have a that sticks out in your mind as an interesting story to share?
The Great Lakes Regional in Michigan. Almost everything I do with St. Joe County, clear down at the other end of the state, I'm following those fellows off the cliff. They run such a great match up there that it's an inspiration. And generally, for the last 2 years, I've gone up there and worked that match all weekend long. Show up on Thursday night, don't come home till Sunday night or Monday morning. Work. It's worth it. Those guys have got it going on. I have more fun up there, and they treat the people that come to help them like royalty. You don't go anywhere hungry up there. And it's a very good time, and it's quite inspiring. Several of my cadre that work my matches, my SO team, have shot Michigan State. They have shot Carolina Cup. They have shot Ohio State. They have shot Great Lakes Regional. They've shot Kent. They've shot Dorr. They've been around the block. I don't get out that much because of my job, but they do. And
right.
We take the best of from all of those, combine it into our local club level matches. And from there, we've evolved into the Hoosier Daddy. And you ask which one I can look fondly on. This year, we are having the first sanctioned Hoosier Daddy, but we've actually run that match for 4 previous years as a Tier 1 club level match. That's the one I look at fondly. That match has some history, and we're really rocking and rolling with that one.
So what made you decide this year, this is the 5th annual Hoosier Daddy Championship. What made you decide that this year was the year you would look to get it sanctioned by headquarters?
My cadre of safety officers actually pushed this. If it was up to me alone, I probably wouldn't have happened. They've been begging me to do it, and they were begging me to do it last year for the 4th annual, and I said, no, we're not ready. I'd been up and seen what they were doing at Great Lakes and saw the amount of work that's going in it. So I made these guys a deal. All my safety officers were gathered around. They said, here's what we're going to do. For the 4th annual, we will run it as a dress rehearsal. I want it run just like a sanctioned match, all the way from getting your courses of fire together and approved, all the way down to, we're not going to give away awards, but I want the list. Who would get what? I want to know. And this will be a dry run. And if it runs correctly, we'll pay the money next year and we'll do it. They ran it like a Swiss watch. They got their sanctioned match. It was effortless. Everything from equipment check all the way down to chronograph. I could not tell them no. I was out of excuses. Here we go.
Real quick before we get too far down the river, let's talk about your shooting career a little bit more. I've got a segment that I call Pick Your Poison. If you haven't heard the podcast, basically the way it works is I've got some either or scenarios that I'm going to throw at you based on your preferences as a shooter and get your take. If you're shooting SSP and you're devoted now to the H&K, and you say you've shot lots of other different things, and you've even shot revolver. If you couldn't shoot SSP and you couldn't shoot revolver, what would be the division that you would choose?
CCP.
Okay.
I really enjoy that one. It definitely leans closer to what one would carry on the street. I prefer to carry my VP9 anymore, but I also have several different compact ones that are right handy and convenient. I don't think I'd go clear down to bug, but
okay. As a shooter, are you shooting standards in a sanctioned match, in a major match? Are you shooting them the first stage of the match or the very last? What's your preference?
I'm going to mess it up either way. I would have to say it's 6-1, half does the other, tomato. Throw it at me and I'll shoot it when it comes up. Luck of the draw. If I have a preference, I'll go right past it and shoot something that I know I can win. Because I'll sit there and overthink a standards until it's blended down.
Right. I hear you. Would you prefer a wide open scenario stage with no barriers, no hard cover, no non-threats at say 20 to 25 yards? You've shot some Bianchi Cup, so you're probably I would be interested to hear your answer to this. Or would you prefer everything up close with lots of non-threats?
That's a tough one, because I would be equally happy. If it's going to be wide open, and here's where I would draw the line: who's got the most movement? Which scenario's got the most movement? I prefer to be moving around. And it's the old adage: if you're not shooting, you're reloading. If you're not reloading, you're moving. If you're not moving, you're shooting.
Right.
And when I design courses of fire, they tend to go right to the limit as far as the max yardage we can use and the max amount of rounds we can use in the open and so on and such forth. Me and my guys especially tend to have long courses of fire. We don't subscribe to the quick and dirty. The average gunfight is 3 rounds course of fire. We're going to give you your money's worth. You pay $15 for my match. You've come for trigger time. I'm going to give you the 18-round scenario.
Right.
And lots of them. And there's going to be movement in there because you come to get practice. It's a game, but it's a practice game. And you can't go to most ranges. We'll take any average indoor range /gun shop. you're going to be shooting from a static position, and in all likelihood, they're not going to let you go from the holster.
Right.
I will let you go from the holster. I will let you move around within the parameters of the safety rules. And we have a slogan called "Figure it out." If there's several positions, I'm not going to sit there and tell you before the course of fire, before the buzzer, which direction you got to go and what you have to do. As a matter of fact, if you ask me, I'm going to tell you, drum roll please, figure it out. And that comes from Charlie Reynolds, who began the program at St. Joe County. And he's absolutely right. And that is not only the correct way to approach it, it's the fun way. So going back to your original question, give me a chance to move around and figure it out. That's the direction I'm going to go. So that's what I would choose.
Okay. So to diverge and to kind of get into your philosophy for a moment as a match director, you like the idea of giving shooters, sounds like you prefer the idea of giving shooters options, and instead of laying the whole thing out for them and saying, you go from here to here to here and shoot the targets, let's go. You design your stages in a way that gives shooters options and allows them to figure it out for themselves.
That is what I endeavor to do whenever I can, is give you those options to figure it out, because there's more than one way to skin a cat on every one of these.
Right.
And IDPA rules, if you look at them hard enough and long enough, really encourage that.
Yep.
And that's what we try and give them. And we did one just recently that had 4 positions in it, and the targets were in varying arrays. It was very symmetrical, left to right, front to rear. But if you wanted to, you could have went all the way up to the front, worked your way back. You could have went to the left and worked right. You could have went left and worked front or back and then right. All 4 of those compass directions were completely up to you. Figure it out. Whatever worked for you to get that job done. Because every position you were behind cover, you were not exposed to any target. You had to lean out in tactical priority at all 4 positions in order to get something, to engage. Mm-hmm. So the movement, you were completely free to do whatever you thought was right. And that was a very well received stage. Everybody had a blast with it. Matter of fact, Great Lakes Regional picked it up. It was Bay 4, Mayhem and Aisle 13. I got up there for that match, and I saw that course of fire, and in the top corner it said "Design Mike Philley." I thought, uh-oh. I got 200 people about to come at me with pitchforks and torches. The course scenario was simply move through the positions and engage the targets 2 rounds each. That was the scenario. For 4 different positions, there were, I think it was 14 rounds total. It just told you what to do. Or it didn't tell you what to do. It just said, here's what's got to get done. Figure it out.
So they gave you credit and blame at the same time.
Exactly. Which is, when your name becomes a verb, you have arrived. And everybody mic'd that stage.
You talked a bit about preferring movement and liking to move around a lot in a stage. Would you prefer to be shooting on the move? And these are 2 very different skills, very important though. Would you prefer to shoot on the move, or would you prefer to shoot moving targets? Which is your preference?
I prefer to shoot on the move, although IDPA changed the rules a couple of years ago. I cannot force that anymore.
Right.
It is to the shooter's benefit to learn that particular skill and use it to their advantage, but I cannot force it. I also enjoy a good moving target, but I prefer to be able to shoot while I'm on the move. Now,
Gotcha.
At St. Joe County, we've got running men, we've got swingers, we've got max traps. We got a lot of moving stuff. So maybe I take that a little bit more for granted.
As a shooter, what's your favorite moving target? If you've got all those different options that you've used as a match director and you've seen as a shooter, what do you like? Which one do you like the best as a shooter?
We have one we call the Flash, and it is a simple drop turn. 1 exposure. It starts, angled away from you, and it turns towards you and then angles back. It's falling down a pipe, and there's a pin in there and a cut that makes it spin. With enough weight, you get a very, very quick exposure. You got to be on it. And I love that thing. I may not land a shot on it, but I sure do love shooting at it. And we have guys that, if we say put 3 rounds on it and it gives you 1 second of exposure, they get it done. And we've got other people that completely whiff it. Well, it is what it is. You came to up your game or you didn't.
It sounds like you like the challenge.
I do. I'm not always going to get it, but I'll sit there and grin. We have another saying at St. Joe that, if you don't walk away from our match mad but smiling about it, we have failed you.
Probably seen this yourself or incorporated in some of your own matches. The hold your beer stage, where you have you come to a point of cover and you've got a steel popper or some sort of an activator that activates a disappearing target, but you also have maybe another paper target that's available to engage before the disappearing target disappears. And some people like to challenge themselves and try to make that, and some people play it safe. What's your thinking when you run into one of those situations?
I will go after the disappearing one every time first, because tactical priority no longer matters on a disappearing target. Mm-hmm. I can shift the tactical priority on a disappearing or surprise target. So I'm going to take advantage of that. If he's only going to peek out for a second, I'm going to go right past everybody else and get him, and then come back and do everybody else the way it's supposed to be done. And that's, I guess, gaming in a certain point. I'm looking at it that way. If it was a real street deal, I don't know what I would do. I really do not. But in a game situation, I'm going to go after that hidden one quick. He's going to become my first priority.
Okay. When we talked a moment ago about your preference of moving, and you talked about shooting on the move, you move from a point of cover to another fault line and find yourself facing a target, maybe a partial with a non-threat, but you could engage it on the move and save some time, even though it's a little more difficult shot, or you could get to that, you could come to a stationary position at the next fault line and engage it where you have a cleaner shot. Which is your preference as a shooter? Do you take that advantage of that movement, or do you go for the safe shot?
I go for the movement. As long as it's an unlimited course of fire and I've got the ammunition to do it, I'm gonna go for it. Right. And even if there's a non-threat there, I'll shoot safely to work around the non-threat. And when I get to my position of cover, if I need to make up a shot, I will. But at that point, you've engaged the target while you're moving. And we'll say, I'm going from point A to point B. It takes me 2 seconds, and I shoot twice at the target in going in there. If I actually land both of them where I want them, I've got a significant advantage now, as opposed to just moving across that in 2 seconds and not firing a shot, having to come back. Right. If I have to do a makeup shot on it, I've lost nothing.
Right.
See where I'm at? Yeah, I still had to use that 2 seconds to cross that open, go from point A to point B. Might as well make something productive out of it.
Right.
I suppose that's a life rule for me. You go from one point to the other, try and make something productive out of it. Don't be idle. And this is no different. And there's guys that will, argue with me on that one, and that's fine. They'll play it way safer. Not me. Until I shoot the non-threat, and then maybe I shouldn't have done that. Okay, you're right.
Then you go away angry but smiling.
Yeah. Well, I probably put the non-threat there. It's my own fault.
Well, as we wrap things up, the final question is always, what is it about IDPA that you love so much that you've devoted your time and your effort to, not just as a shooter and improving your own personal shooting game, but to devote your time as a match director, setting up matches, and now running your own sanctioned match? What is it about this sport that you love so much?
Seeing people come in and experience it for the first time and then stick with it and grow in it. almost every one of the safety officers I have working with me now started well after I came along as a green shooter, and they've gotten the same bug. I've watched that same bug that bit me bite them, and it's a joy to behold. I'm not the only crazy guy on the planet. and to see, it's difficult to explain. We'll see women shooters come in, and they'll come in and they'll watch for a little bit and say, I don't know, this is intimidating. And it's not just women, it happens to men too. I see it both ways, I suppose. But it's intimidating. Mm-hmm. And they finally get out there and they pick up a gun and they go at it. And they're standing there grinning when it's over with. But they say, I didn't do well. I said, you know what? You are miles ahead of the guy that sat at home on the couch because he was too chicken to come down here.
Right.
And seeing that is worth it. I enjoy that part right there. And then when they come back after doing that, yeah, I'm ready to do it again. Yep, there you go. There's the paycheck.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I really do appreciate it, and look forward to an opportunity in the future to see you on the range.
Oh, absolutely. We look forward to seeing you as well. Come on down anytime.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.